Can you guess how many years the longest prison sentence ever handed out was? Try 141,078 years.
What did she do? What's good, YouTube? Today we're going to be looking at people who outlived insane prison sentences. Look, I've been seeing a lot of sentences of people getting life, but I want to know how they look like when they actually reach the end of their prison sentence. Without further ado, let's get started.
Most people find it hard being locked indoors for a few weeks.
Yup.
Imagine what decades of incarceration can do.
I can't do it.
There are cases where people who were practically kids got released as elders into a world that was vastly different to the one they left when they were in prison.
I know they get institutionalized, but I'm thinking, like, imagine not even knowing what phones are to seeing an iPhone.
Let's take a look at some people who have outlived the most insane prison sentences ever given.
Let's get it. And also, it's like, can you even be shocked at anything? Because you missed the stages of evolution when it came to like technology, music, shows. There's so much for you to catch up on, and it's like, it's kind of sad because you only have a couple years left to live.
Thomas Trantino. By his own admission, Thomas Trantino was a very sick and dangerous person.
Okay.
Born in 1938, he'd become a serious substance abuser at just 14 years old.
14? No. You need to be doing subtraction, not substances. Wait till he finds out the kids now are using vape instead of this. Probably gonna look back and regret everything he did.
And had already spent 6 years behind bars by the age of 20. On one
Wow.
terrible night in August 1963, while heavily intoxicated, he took part in an altercation that ended in the demise of 2 policemen at Trantino's hands.
Damn!
Trantino turned himself in after 66 hours on the run, but claimed he didn't commit the crimes he'd been accused of.
Oh yeah, but you want to be on a run for 66 hours? How did that make sense? Did you have like post-nut clarity? Where you're like, oh damn, hold on, I gotta go back. It's already too late, buddy, and you look even more suspicious.
However, with all the evidence pointing to the contrary, he was soon convicted of his alleged crimes.
GG's.
Not only that, the jury decided he deserved the death penalty. After being committed in 1963, he sat on death row until 1971, when New Jersey abolished the death penalty. His sentence was then altered to life with eligibility for parole after 20.
I genuinely don't know what I'd rather want. Would I want life in prison or the death penalty? Because it's like at one point, it's like, I'm gonna spend the rest of my life behind this bars eating this trash ass food. And the other one is like, damn, but what if I don't want to go away now? Let me know what y'all would pick.
25 years. But being on death row turned this broken man into something of a writer and an artist, and saw him write and illustrate 2 books from behind bars.
So you want to be a good guy when you're one flinch away from dying? When you're one sneeze away from going away? Like you couldn't have decided to do this way earlier and start a book? Interesting. And why that drawing actually look like you?
I guess that's one way to pass the time. In 2002, Trantino's parole was finally granted after he'd spent over 38 years total in the hole, making him the longest serving prisoner in the state of New Jersey. Ricky Jackson. Could you imagine losing nearly 40 years of your life to a crime you didn't commit? Unbelievable.
Okay. You see, I don't care what anybody says. There is no amount of money that someone could ever get paid for some bullshittery like that. 40 years? It's like, even if you give me all the money there is in the world, it's like, bro, my meat don't even work no more. I could barely move. I need to go to sleep. I don't know how to use the technology. My family probably don't even recognize me. There's just so much relatives I know that probably passed away. How are you gonna ever even enjoy that money?
Unbelievably, that nightmare became Ricky Jackson's reality back in 1975. At just 19 years old, Jackson and his friends Wiley and Ronnie Bridgman were convicted for a fatal attack on salesman Harry Franks. The entire case hinged on the witness statement of a 13-year-old named Eddie Vernon, who claimed he saw the boys commit the heinous crime. Aside from that one witness, there was no other physical evidence to suggest Jackson or the Bridgman brothers were there. Jackson was initially given the death sentence, but luckily, several appeals and mistakes in paperwork spared him from the capital punishment. And thank God it did, because in 2013, the star witness broke down in court and claimed the police had coerced him into falsely testifying.
You waited that long to say it though? You're actually an asshole. I don't care even if they did coerce him. Granted, yes, it's bad that they coerced him, but that hasn't been eating you in like the next couple of years. I don't know, 10 years? You waited until 40 years for you to finally tell them, oh, he didn't do anything.
It turned out Vernon never actually saw the attack. In fact, he was on a school bus a mile away when it all happened.
Wow.
The shocking turn of events saw Jackson exonerated in 2014, along with Wiley Bridgman. They'd each spent 39 years waiting for justice alongside Ronnie Bridgman, who had been released in 2003. The three are due to receive a payout of $18 million in compensation for the...
That's still not enough. I don't care what anybody says. I'm sorry. I'd rather the 39 years of living and actually developing relationships and making my life worth something than 18 million. Because 18 million will never do that.
The decades they spent behind bars. If you were in Jackson's shoes, do you think that cold hard cash would be enough to make up for half your life lost to prison?
Let
me know in the comments
No amount
below.
of money is.
Otis Johnson.
Okay.
The saying wrong place, wrong time is one that former convict Otis Johnson knows all too well. Back in 1975, Johnson was arrested for a crime he claims he never committed. On May 5th, as he was walking down the street, Johnson was stopped and searched by officers in Harlem, New York. The officers alleged Otis fit the description of a man involved in a nearby shooting of a police officer. The description only said the man was wearing a tan jacket, but that was enough to convince the officers of Johnson's guilt. Somehow, despite a glaring lack of evidence or credible eyewitnesses, Johnson was sentenced to 25 years to life for the attack he was accused of. He got through the decades of incarceration by drawing on his previous training as a monk in Hong Kong. He set up various programs to teach meditation skills to other inmates inside New York's Greenhaven prison, and even helped out doing secretarial work.
Did he do it?
His good behavior made him eligible for parole 9 times, and during several of his parole hearings, he was told that if he just confessed, he could walk free. Johnson clearly had a backbone made out of pure steel.
Okay, because he never
each
did.
time, he refused to confess to a crime.
Okay, if someone is refusing to confess to their crime and they're damn near a year away from leaving, I'ma actually believe they just never did it. And with his background, let's be real, they were arresting anybody in the 1970s, any black person. So I feel bad if he served all this time and he genuinely didn't do anything.
Crime he hadn't committed. Fortunately, his 9th parole hearing in 2014 was positive, and he was finally released. When you do the math, that means he had been in prison for almost 40 years, and all because he was wearing a tan jacket. Seems like New York needs to upgrade its fashion police. Søren Mathiasen.
What did he do?
Denmark is famous for its bicycle culture, its colorful houses, and of course, Lego. But it's also the home of one of the longest, oldest, and strangest jail sentences in the world. Say hello to Søren Mathiasen. All the way back in 1876, this plump fellow engaged in the services of horse dealer Niels Bogeland. He wanted to borrow money and also asked for his help finding a wealthy wife to marry. But the wife Søren ended up with clearly didn't come with a lot of cash, because when Bogeland came to collect the money he'd lent out, Søren couldn't pay. With substantial debts and no way to pay them, Søren decided his only way out was to eliminate Bogeland.
So you couldn't pay him back. I understand. That's a debt you could never do. You gonna take money from him, get a girl, and hit him? You couldn't just at least spare his life and just move away or something? That's a little extreme.
Which was his biggest mistake by far. Soon after the deed was done, he was caught and ended up serving a life sentence of over 49 years with hard labor at the Horsen State Prison.
What? Oh, damn. So it's not even a prison where you could just be chilling. Now your ass work for 2 cents an hour.
As you can see, the years of grueling work took their toll.
Yes.
But he did somehow manage to keep the pounds packed on. This devious Dane was eventually released on parole in 1925, and hopefully he steered clear of horse dealers and bargain wives.
Imagine being released close to the Great Depression. You finally received freedom, but at the cost of what? Now outside is also gonna feel like a prison.
The rest of his days. Betty Smithey.
What happened?
Women are just as capable as men, and that includes being horrendous criminals. For proof, look no further than the case of Betty Smithey, America's longest-serving female inmate. In 1963, Smithey was convicted of taking the life of a minor and was sentenced to life in prison without.
Look, I don't understand. If you hate your baby, you could have just not give birth, right? You could have just ended it. You could have just took a plan B. You could have just popped a pill and poof, the baby would have never existed. Why are you mad at your baby? It's not even a kid, it's a baby. What could the baby do to get you that mad?
Without the possibility of parole. In her early years as an inmate, she managed to escape 4 times from 3 different prisons.
4 times? Who are the people guarding this? Fetty Wap, Stevie Wonder, is everyone just blind? Do we just not have functioning eyes? Why are y'all letting her escape this much amount of times without actually thinking to yourself, wow, she's leaving a lot?
So either she was a regular Houdini, or those female penitentiaries were more insecure than your Facebook data. Nevertheless, over the years, Betty stopped trying to escape from prison and started trying to better herself. She enrolled in self-improvement courses, got her general education certificates, and even wrote a little poetry. But because Smithey was sentenced before 1973, the laws at the time dictated she could only become eligible for parole if the governor granted her clemency. For those of us that don't speak jail, that means extending mercy in the form of a sentence change. She applied in 2003 unsuccessfully, but in 2012 another appeal was granted and her sentence was cut to 49 years.
Like, that's crazy. You still served 49 years. I wonder if you serve prison that long, if you get accustomed to it. Because what are you gonna do now? And you're gonna be known as the lady who murdered her baby. I don't know. This gotta be overwhelming.
Making her a free woman at 69 years old.
You left the prison to go to the retirement center. Ooh. Now what?
It may be a little late to start really living life with something fun like skydiving, but at least she has 5 decades of great TV to catch up on.
Okay.
John Franzese. In 1950, John Franzese was inducted into the Colombo crime family of New York City and quickly gained a terrifying reputation as one of the Mafia's most fearsome thugs. But despite claiming to have flatlined on...
Bro, gangsters used to dress so cool. Like, I feel like this is how I want to perceive gangsters. Like, people who just dress this fly and just move along with the cleanest outfits. But, like, I feel like this is more intimidating.
Almost 50 people. He was only convicted in 1967 of masterminding a series of bank robberies across the country.
So that's what y'all arrest them on? Oh, forget the dead people. Oh, you stole money. We're getting you for that. Let's set our priorities straight, New York.
Yes, the police were willing to take whatever they could get by that point. He was charged with a 50-year sentence, but was released on parole in 1978, though on at least 6 occasions he returned to prison for parole violations.
Wow.
Then in 2011, and at the grand old age of 93, this granddaddy of crime was sentenced to a further 8 years in prison for extortion and loan sharking.
How do you serve that long just to go back?
He hit the ripe old age of 100 in 2017, and wrapping up his 8-year prison term, he was released from jail.
How do you survive that long? Does someone supervise you? Because there's no way you're able to do anything at that age. I don't even think you could wake up on time.
Total, this mobster spent more than 40 years behind bars throughout his life, meaning he basically lived half a life of crime and half a life of jail time. Sheldry Topp. In 1958, and at just 13 years old, Sheldry Topp was involuntarily committed to a state hospital for some seriously destructive mental issues.
Wow.
He was treated with electroshock therapy, which even at the time was considered inhumane and torturous.
If anything, shock therapy is gonna make you even more cuckoo. You really think electrocuting my brain is gonna actually cause it to do something good? Who came up with this? Some of y'all scientists got team of degrees. You got your degree from a random old man down the street telling you you know what to do.
So it's hardly surprising that in 1962, Topp ran away. But in his frenzied state, he wound up responsible for the death of an attorney in Oakland County, Michigan. At just 17 years old, Topp was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Despite being clinically diagnosed as a sociopath, Sheldry was held in a minimum security prison, which housed only the best behaved inmates. Despite this, he never attempted to escape. Instead, he completed rehabilitation programs and multiple academic courses, all from behind bars.
I'm surprised people that are like mentally like crazy find their way in prison. If anything, I would assume they would be worse.
The years passed Sheldry by without hope of freedom until 2012, when the Supreme Court decided sentencing a minor to life in prison without parole was unconstitutional. Sheldry was given a revised sentence with a 40-year minimum in 2019, and seeing as he'd already served a staggering 56 years, it meant he was immediately eligible for freedom.
Imagine balding in prison. You have to deal with sleeping in the most inhumane freaking cells, and you're balding. Can I choose a struggle? Coming back out bald? You might as well just take me to Turkey.
Gaining the title of oldest juvenile prisoner serving a life sentence in Michigan, he walked free at the age of 74, having traded in his...
Would you even call this walking out? Like, at this point, he's stumbling out of there. He has a cane, and it's not even those one-leg canes. He has to handle something.
Handcuffs for
He has to put 2 hands on something.
Howard Christensen. Back in 1937,
Harry Potter? Yo, you see, this is what happens when you say Voldemort too much.
16-year-old Howard Christensen was involved in a crime spree turned sour that resulted in the demise of school teacher Ada Carey. Christensen's acts shocked the state of South Dakota, and after Howard received a life sentence, 3,000 people signed a petition demanding that the boy never be pardoned. The years behind bars brought out...
Yo, what teacher did you kill? Was this like the greatest teacher in the state? Why 3,000 people want to make sure that you never leave?
Christensen's crazy side, and he ended up spending 30 years on and off inside Yankton State Mental Facility. In the 1970s, his sentence was revised, making him eligible for parole. Then in 1995, due to his age and failing health, he was transferred to a nursing home. He died in 1999, age 79, having been institutionalized for just over 58 years before his final few years of freedom. For perspective, he'd spent almost 3 times as long on the inside than he had on the outside. That's almost as much time as a World of Warcraft international champion spends in his mom's basement, only with less Cheetos and Mountain Dew.
I know some Discordians that spend more time in VC talking to you-know-who.
Bill Wallace. All the way back in 1926, an Australian man named Bill Wallace was deemed criminally insane for a truly bizarre reason.
Is it really bizarre? Look at him. He just looks bizarre. Like, I'm not surprised.
He was never formally convicted of anything, though it was, let's say, heavily implied that he shot a man over an argument about a cigarette. Reportedly, and this isn't a joke, he really hated smoking.
So you're gonna end someone's life over it? I look at some of these criminal sentencing, and it's like, in my head, I would never end someone's life, regardless of how much I might despise them. But you're doing it over a cigarette. How mentally ill do you have to be for you to do that? You can't be sane. There's no way.
But when asked about the crime, he point-blank refused to answer a single question. This led 2 doctors deeming him criminally insane and unfit to stand trial. Instead, he was to be held indefinitely at Victoria's Ararat Lunatic Asylum. This meant he would only be released once the governor was convinced he was cured.
That's never happening. If you're gonna murder someone over a cigarette, you're not leaving.
Wallace continued refusing to speak to the doctors about his crime. He remained in the institute for a staggering 63 years until he passed away there just a few days before his 108th birthday.
Was it that deep that you didn't want to tell anyone why you ended someone's life over a Marlboro cigarette? Over some cancer sticks? I'm telling you right now, the teenagers in this generation are gonna end lives over a vape pen. I'm calling it.
Despite being there for the bulk of his life, technically, he was never sentenced for his alleged crimes. That's one bizarre way to beat the system. Charles Edred Ford.
Why are you smiling like that?
1952, Charles Edred Ford faced a trial that was stacked against him from the start. His trial, in which he was accused of a fatal shooting, involved an all-white jury in Maryland 12 years before racial segregation in America ended. During his trial, neither of his alibi witnesses were called to testify, both of whom could vouch that Ford was never at the scene of the crime.
Yo! You would swear that judges would be like the most unbiased people known to mankind. Who paid them off?
2 witnesses that testified against Ford contradicted each other, but the attorney he was given wasn't even a trial lawyer, making him unable to adequately defend his client.
You don't need a public defendant for your ass to realize that it doesn't add up. Their stories just don't add up.
Those factors combined, Ford ended up receiving a life sentence. After his unfair trial, Charles maintained his innocence, but ended up serving over 64 years in prison before his case was seriously reviewed in 2015. With the evidence finally re-examined, his sentence was vacated, meaning the verdict of his first trial was overruled, having been deemed a miscarriage of justice.
Okay, why do y'all wait this long to do it though? Can we start reviewing cases of more prisoners that got arrested during this time? Y'all wait till like they start becoming more rats for you to do anything, for their whole skin to just start wrinkling up.
That said, he wasn't let completely off the hook, as his innocence couldn't be entirely proved beyond doubt. So instead of total freedom, he was transferred to a health center in Baltimore in 2016, having reached the impressive age of 86. 64 years is certainly a long time to wait for only partial freedom. But judging by the tears of joy he reportedly shed upon learning of his transfer, Ford was just happy to have his case reassessed in a fairer light. But with his original trial's judgment being so shady, do you think Ford should be compensated for all this?
Yes, that is the first thing I'm doing. What? Y'all knew my trial was shady and I know I didn't do anything. Maintained my innocence for the whole time. And you not even gonna give me $1? Y'all gonna end up making me an actual murderer and you'll see me back. Don't do that. Give me my money.
Years locked away? Or do you think there's no smoke without fire? Let me know in the comments below. Richard Honeck. In 1976, America celebrated its bicentennial. The 200th anniversary of the nation saw much celebration. But it was also the year that Richard Honeck passed away at the age of 97. Honeck had served what was at the time the longest prison sentence ever to end in a prisoner's release. He was jailed in 1899 for his role in the demise of Walter Kohler, which happened so long ago that they didn't print his photo in the paper. They used a drawing. Honeck spent the first 12 years of his life sentence
This is like the first ever mugshot?
at Joliet Correctional Center in Illinois, but that changed after he attacked a deputy warden with a DIY shiv. He received 20 days in solitary confinement before being moved to Menard Penitentiary, where he peacefully spent the final 35 years of his sentence, swapping shivs for baking gloves as he worked in the prison's bakery. He spent
Why he look like he's enjoying his time there? I'm seeing that little smirk of his, bro. If anything, this was his plan. I feel like he only committed those crimes so that his ass could actually be in a place that he likes.
a grand total of 64 years incarcerated before he was granted parole in 1963. Despite his prison baking efforts, the cake you see here was probably the first decent one he'd received in over 6 decades.
I thought he was the one that made the cake. I was about to be like, yo, hold up, maybe I gotta go to culinary school in prison if they making cakes like that.
But when you take a look at his first mugshot versus his last,
wow,
it'll probably take more than a few slices of cake to make up for all those lost years.
100%.
Paul Geidel Jr. When the aforementioned Richard Honeck was released from prison in 1963, Paul Geidel Jr. was more than 50 years into his life sentence for similarly violent crimes. And when Geidel Jr. was released in 1980, he surpassed Honeck's record by serving 68 years and 8 months in the can. At just 17 years old, Geidel attempted to rob an old man.
The way this narrator is saying this, are they getting like Guinness World Records for this? Oh, you only served 64 years? Well, buddy, I served 68. Y'all are actually serving people's lives in prison. This is insane. The fact that you're waking up every day in prison and like you can't even go outside for 60 years straight is a depressing thought. I haven't even lived one half of that.
But accidentally suffocated him with the chloroform rag he'd intended to knock him out with. Yeah, right. Accidentally. When caught, Geidel Jr. was sentenced to life in prison with a 20-year minimum. Although he became eligible for parole in 1931, Geidel saw through the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and even the 1970s behind bars. He was finally offered parole in 1974, but having spent more of his life in prison than outside, he declined. Prison had sadly become his entire world.
That makes sense. If you're living in prison, the rest of the world is gonna seem scary to you. Like, how are you gonna even adapt in a world that you don't understand?
The outside world was alien and unfamiliar to him now, especially considering his old age. But before he could see the rest of his life pass by from inside of his cage, he was convinced to accept freedom in 1980. By that point, Geidel was 86 years old.
Wow.
He'd spent the best part of 7 decades paying for his mistake, and he lived out his final days at a nursing home. Which, if my grandma's claims are anything to go by, is even worse than prison. Must have been a home away from home for a lifelong jailbird like Geidel Jr.
True.
Johnson.
Retirement centers gotta be feeling like prison. Actually, so, you know, I could see why he liked it. Or he might have wanted to go there.
Dyke Grigsby. When Johnson Dyke Grigsby started his prison sentence in 1908, Theodore Roosevelt was the president, cellophane had just been invented, and the first ever Model T car was recently made.
Damn, so you went to jail at the worst time.
By the time Grigsby was released, email was being developed, Motorola was selling the world's first mobile phones, and the floppy disk had been invented. That's a huge chunk of history to have missed out on. But for the crime of fatally injuring a man over a card game in a saloon, Grigsby pled guilty to second-degree murder to a...
Why do y'all crash out over the dumbest things possible? Like, if you guys murdered someone on self-defense or like because they came at a family member, those are not understandable, but they make more sense. Over a card game and some cigarettes? Like, what are we doing? Can we go to jail for better reasons? Okay, that sounds crazy. Or just don't go to jail. Just don't go to jail. Live life actually being normal.
To avoid the death penalty. He proceeded to serve a hefty 66 years in the Indiana State Prison. He appealed for clemency from the board a grand total of 33 times, but was denied every last request. Although he reportedly seemed elated to be transferred to a nursing home in 1974, his almost 90-year-old smile was hiding decades of institutionalization. He'd become...
Yeah, because he knows he'll be able to play like bingo and actual cards when he gets there. He's probably just waiting on the day he could do that.
I'm completely reliant on the routine and systems of the prison, and after spending time in that Michigan nursing home, he voluntarily returned to prison in 1976.
Wow.
More evidence of just how bad nursing homes really must be. Maybe
literally.
My grandma is right after all. Joseph Ligon.
Damn.
What do you think most 15-year-olds spend their time doing these days? Playing Fortnite and making TikToks?
Yep.
Well, that's a world apart from what Joseph Ligon was doing at that age. Back in 1953, this juvenile delinquent was busy being sentenced to life in prison without parole. He and 5 of his friends had gotten drunk and decided to commit a series of robberies and a crime spree that left 8 men injured, 2 of them fatally.
So y'all just got bored and say, yeah, let's just start ending lives. What type of suicide squad is this? At 15. You know what? This generation is better than the previous ones. Because y'all could call us cringe, XYZ, blah, blah, blah. But at least we didn't get drunk and start murdering people. That's not in our itinerary. I don't think people just want to link up like, hey, yo, bro, what you doing this Tuesday? You want to get drunk and start going on a killing spree? It doesn't work like that.
Ligon pleaded guilty to his crime spree in Pennsylvania, one of only 6 states where life sentences for this type of crime are imposed without the possibility possibility for parole. At the time, that meant the 15-year-old was essentially sentenced to die in prison. The years passed without any light at the end of the tunnel for Ligon. But between 2012 and 2016, new laws dictated that mandatory life sentences without parole for juveniles was unconstitutional. Ligon was offered parole in 2017.
Yo, this man's hair genetics is so strong. Because what do you mean he still has a full set of hair at this age? And all of them are white as hell. It's low-key kind of aura.
But just like Paul Geidel Jr., he declined. He rejected the proposed offer of supervised probation.
Why he kind of clean though? They gave him the shades, and hey, the prisoners were looking clean too. Are y'all sure y'all were actually punishing this man?
Asserting that if he couldn't be completely free of the justice system, he may as well just stay in jail. By that point, Ligon had become the world's oldest juvenile to serve life without parole. To this day, he's still behind bars, having served over 67 years in prison.
Damn!
Renee Lima. At just 19 years old, Renee Lima-Marin was heading down a dangerous path. In an attempt to make a quick buck, he and his friend Michael Clifton robbed 2 video stores at gunpoint in 1998.
Video stores, of all places? You expect video stores to have money like that? Buddy, let me come up off your Transformers 4. If you want actual money, go to places where there's more money. Why would you crash out over some video CDs?
After their getaway's car's license plate number and their descriptions were given to the police, the 2 were arrested. Lima was sentenced to a staggering total of 98 years in prison.
Wow.
That's a huge amount of.
What did you steal? You must have stole like Cardi's new album or some shit. You must have sold like a movie that just wasn't out yet.
Time, seeing as no one was injured, let alone fatally. It turns out the prosecutor had dissected the robberies into a series of different actions, including kidnapping, as the pair had forced employees to move from one room to another. Added all together, the sentencing structure could have resulted in a 300-year sentence.
Damn!
So if anything, these guys got lucky. Even so, Lima was looking at a life behind bars.
So you been already served prison and you went back. I don't understand. Prison's supposed to be a deterrent. How do some of y'all go to prison, get out, and then just go back to prison? Like, did you learn anything? Did you just not mind prison?
It was until 2008 when he was released on parole. A clerical error in his paperwork listed him as serving his sentences concurrently, all at the same time, not consecutively, meaning he could be released 9 decades early. Determined not to make the same mistake twice, Lima worked hard, started a family, and became a model citizen. But in 2014, the mistake was finally caught by the courts and Lima was rearrested.
Wow, that's kind of crazy. Like, just let him go at that point, especially if he's, doing good.
Fortunately, the judge in charge of his case saw the reincarceration as unjust, the ruling was overturned, and Renee was released for good in 2017.
Good.
Proving how far he'd come, he even took steps to apologize face-to-face with one of the store clerks from that fateful night 20 years before. If you were in that clerk situation, would you have been able to forgive Lima after?
So long as you didn't hurt me or shoot me in any way, why not? At the end of the day, it's not my money. It's the company's money.
For everything that happened? Let me know in the comments. Chamoy Thipyaso.
You're named after some Mexican sauce? I like chamoy, but come on, bro. You're tarnishing the name.
Can you guess how many years the longest prison sentence ever handed out was?
What?
200 years? 1,000 years? 2,000 years? Try 141,078 years.
What did she do? Oh, she must have been the one that dropped a nuke in America. What are you talking about? How do you even receive a prison sentence that long?
It may sound insane, but that was the final number handed down to Chamoy back in 1989. She was the wife of a high-ranking member of the Royal Thai Air Force and an employee of the Petroleum Authority for Thailand. For a sentence so severe, you can't help but imagine what unbelievable atrocities this woman must have committed. Did she blow up a skyscraper full of orphans? Was she responsible for the extinction of dinosaurs? Or did she kill Harambe?
All of the above.
Close. The crime she found herself wrapped up in was fraud. She was the.
That's how much money is important to y'all? That y'all gotta sentence her an amount that she will literally not outlive? Y'all wanna arrest her reincarnation. Y'all wanna arrest her whether she goes to heaven or hell.
Head of a pyramid scheme that defrauded over 16,000 people and netted her more than $204 million.
Damn!
This hefty scheme threatened to undermine the entire Thai banking system, leading to the 100,000-year sentencing.
You might as well just have moved after that.
However, the Thai laws of the time specified that those convicted of fraud could not serve more than 20 years in prison, rendering the sentencing unlawful. She was given a revised sentence and was released after only 8 years. Now that's what you call a lucky escape.
Did she use her money? Anyways, YouTube, let me know which prison sentence was the craziest to you. Do you think you would be able to reintegrate into society after serving that long? Make sure you guys like and subscribe. Join us on Twitch, all that good stuff. Wax up for life. Love y'all.